Thank you for joining our webcast today on Emotional Intelligence, Why Seniors Leaders Need It and How to Develop It. My name is Dana Smith and I'm the Marketing Director for High Performing Systems. I will be your host during the webcast and, along with our co-presenter and subject matter expert, Deborah Canarella, will answer your questions using the question function while the presentation is playing. I would like to start by welcoming you to the session. We truly appreciate your time and look forward to sharing this information with you. High Performing Systems, the sponsor of today's presentation, has specialized in innovative assessments and customized consulting and training to accelerate high performance in leaders, teams, and organizations around the world since 1984. If you would like to connect with an HPS expert on individual or organizational talent management needs, please email info@hpsys.com or leave a comment in the post-webcast survey. HPS is a leading provider of Train the Trainer certifications for the EQI 2.0 and the EQ 360. The EQI assessments family is used by organizations to support selection and succession plans, leader and team training, and coaching, career, and life development. The EQI is the most scientifically validated and researched emotional intelligence assessment available. In addition to in-house training, HPS offers a live online workshop. Please email Deborah at hpsys.com for more information. Before we get started, I have a few administrative announcements. Your telephones and voice-over IP mics are muted so that background noise will not be heard during the call. As we listen to the presentation, please send your question to Deborah Canarella, our co-presenter and subject matter expert, using the question function on your control panel. You'll see that to the right of the screen. At the end of the webcast, we invite you to please give us your feedback by taking a brief survey. Also, please note you will receive a copy of the presentation handouts by email. So, if everyone is ready, we'll get started. Our presenter today is Dr. Dick Thompson, author of The Stress Effect, Why Smart Leaders Make Dumb Decisions and What to Do About It. Dick is the president and CEO of High Performing Systems, a consulting firm he founded in 1984. He is an award-winning organizational psychologist and widely known for his extensive achievements in scientific research in the areas of leadership, cognitive ability, emotional intelligence, phiro theory, psychological type, and more. Dr. Thompson has worked with hundreds of organizations around the world to implement successful talent management systems and talent identification processes. Our co-presenter and subject matter expert today is Deborah Canarella, High Performing Systems Director of Operations. Deborah is responsible for many of the assessment, training, and consulting projects conducted by HPS. She has worked with clients in a variety of industries and consulting and training capacities and has extensive experience in many aspects of talent management, especially leader assessment and feedback. Deborah is available today to answer your questions using the question function that I mentioned earlier. So welcome Dick and welcome Deborah.
Thank you, Dana, and welcome, Deborah. I'm excited about what we're going to do today and working with you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, what I want to do is just take a minute and look at the agenda, the things that I'd like for us to talk about. One of them is looking at emotional intelligence as a critical factor for the success of senior leaders. And as we do that, begin to move into a 5-step process for emotional intelligence development in senior leaders and how we can create a process and implement it that ensures the success of the development of those individuals. And we'll inject a few case studies as we go along. We'll have some toward the end to kind of wrap up some of what we've been talking about. And I'm also going to make sure that we inject best practices along the way. So we have a lot of topics to talk about as we go through the session today. And to get started, what I would like to do is look at the concept of emotional intelligence, since we're going to be talking about this, just so we have a common definition. I have a little bias toward this one, but let me go through it. It's a person's innate ability to perceive and manage his or her own emotions in a manner that results in successful interactions with the environment and, if other people are present, to also perceive and manage their emotions in a manner that results in successful interpersonal interactions. Two basic parts to the definition. One is I can be emotionally intelligent even when no one else is around, just with the way that I deal with myself, how I'm handling the emotions that I'm currently experiencing, how I'm thinking, and the neuronal pathways that I'm building in my brain just through my thought processes. And then if other people are around, then the second part comes into play, and that is now being able to manage my emotions, being aware of and being able to manage my emotions, as well as being aware of and helping manage the emotions in our relationship. So that's kind of a big picture view of emotional intelligence. We could look at it in a little simpler form graphically. With this particular graphic, what you see is being self-aware is a major part of emotional intelligence, and being able to self-manage. So I'm aware of my emotions and what's going on inside me, and I'm also able to manage those emotions. So if it's a negative emotion, I'm able to manage those and not let it cause me to do things that would not be very emotionally intelligent. I can also manage my emotions so that I experience the right emotion for a particular setting to help me be more successful. And then awareness also extends into being aware of what's going on in others, picking up on their body language, their facial expressions, the tone of their voice, and understanding what types of emotions they are experiencing, and then being able to manage our relationship so that it's successful as we go forward. So a fairly basic model that will help us in our understanding as we get deeper into emotional intelligence. Now, keep in mind that emotional intelligence is kind of an abstract term or a macro term, that when we're saying emotional intelligence, we're implying that there are a lot of subcomponents to emotional intelligence. It's not just a unitary concept. But it has different pieces to it, and as we get deeper into the presentation, we'll begin to look at some of those pieces and how they interact and influence how successful we are in various situations that we find ourselves in.
And before we get further into it, we wanted to provide a graphical view of why EI is so important for leader success. In senior leader role levels, what you've probably discovered, there is a basic requirement for a certain level of IQ. You can't rise to high levels in organizations if you don't have above average IQ. So that's the price of admission. In this particular image, let's say we have two different leaders who both meet the basic requirements in terms of IQ and job experience or technical experience. If leaders are relatively equal on those areas, in terms of leader success or potential for success in the role, they might be pretty well matched, and you don't necessarily have a differentiator in this type of a perspective. So let's say that you've got two leaders that are equal in terms of their IQ and their experience. What's really going to tip the scale in favor of one over the other, if everything else is equal, the emotional intelligence will be a key differentiator. And this is where you sometimes see examples of research that suggests that EI can account for up to 47% of the difference in leader success. This is where that's coming from. If you look at a situation like this, where you have a leader on one side, on the right, for example, with very high EI, good scores, well balanced, knows how to use those EI dimensions in a successful way, that leader will have the advantage in terms of leader success or leader potential. On the left-hand side, if you have the leader who had been equal on the other components but not as great on the EI factor, they'll be at a disadvantage. So especially as you go up in the organization,
that EI component becomes more and more critical. And in fact, we have an example of a case study within a company in New Zealand Telecom, conducted some research where they took 70 leaders from their organization and split the leaders into two groups, very simply just divided into a high-performing group and a low-performing group. And what they did when they looked at those leaders using a tool for emotional intelligence called the EQI that you'll see more about later, just using that one dimension, what they discovered is that the higher performers tended also to have higher total EQI scores. And in fact, when the research dug down even deeper into the subcomponents, they found some specific subskills that impacted the leadership success. And this is getting back to what Dick was mentioning earlier, that there are components within EI. The concept of emotional intelligence is a macro view, but when you look at specific research around different success profiles, you'll start to pick up patterns within the subscale level. So in this particular example, you see that the EI attributed to 48% of the difference between those high and low performers. So a follow-up step that we're going to talk more about is around leader development. If you know what the success profile looks like that impacts successful performance on the job, you can create leader development plans that are based on those profiles. So how do you help leaders in different scenarios? Whether you've got great EI to start with, you focus development around how to help them maximize the potential that they bring. Or if you have a leader whose starting point in terms of EI is not as great, how do you help that person to develop and stretch as much as possible where they can? And then in areas that just will continue to be something that would be a stretch target for them, how do you help them put containment strategies in place so that those challenges don't get in the way of their success? So different approaches to development depending on where your starting point is, but if you target your development based on where you start and what kind of pattern you're looking for in terms of a success profile, then you can really help that leader maximize their chances for success. So this just reinforces the idea that the emotional intelligence is situationally specific. Every job or role level within a particular organization will have a different pattern or profile that helps to predict success. So what you need to do in your organizations is identify what that situation calls for in terms of EI, and this is something that we help our clients to achieve. We can come in, conduct that success profile analysis to determine for a specific organization, specific role level, specific job, what does that success pattern really look like? And then how do you help create your development plans based on that pattern? We also find there's critical leader skills that are required for leadership success, and Dick is going to talk to us more about these.
Thank you, Deborah. Some critical skills that we'd want to think about is, like Deborah was mentioning before, that EI has a significant contribution to a leader's success. And you'll find studies ranging from 10% to 47, 48, sometimes even higher in terms of the impact of emotional intelligence. In addition to that, another skill that we refer to as self-awareness and is also a component of emotional intelligence, as we saw a few minutes ago. Self-awareness is critical. Being able to recognize the emotions that you're feeling on the inside, recognize the emotions of the people around you, and being aware of what's going on and how those emotions are transitioning over time is critical for a leader to be successful. Leaders in general tend to move at a fairly high rate of speed. They burn up a lot of energy. Energy management is one of the critical skills. I need to be aware when I'm getting tired. I'm not getting enough sleep. I'm not getting the right foods. I'm not getting the right exercise. I need to know when I need to take a break. I mean, to the extent that I might need to take a power nap this afternoon. A 20, 30-minute nap just to recharge. So being able to manage energy is critical to my success. Stress management, I think, goes without saying, is something that leaders have to be able to do, particularly senior leaders. I need to be able to manage my own stress, and I need to be able to manage the stress in the organization. We've conducted extensive research that shows that as your stress level goes up, your ability to make quality decisions goes down, and it goes down quickly. And one of the reasons it goes down is that it significantly degrades your ability to access both your cognitive ability and your emotional intelligence. And when the two of those goes down, so does the quality of your decision making. Being resilient, having a good stress management plan, having the right attitude, getting the right sleep, the right food, all of those contribute to making you resilient to stress so that you can bounce back quickly and continue to make good decisions. One of the other things that we're beginning to notice in organizations is that there's a diffusion, so to speak, of the Gen X and Gen Y in the organization, as well as some of the newer generations coming on board. And for the most part, they're in the lower levels of the organization, but they're gradually starting to move on up. They respond very differently to leaders. They have different needs, different expectations of what leaders are going to do in the organization, and emotionally intelligent leaders seem to be able to lead them much more effectively than the old style of leadership, where it's, my way or the highway, just do what I tell you and don't ask questions. So there are a lot of critical skills out there that leaders need to be aware of, and obviously we can't cover them all today in this presentation, so we're going to focus just on emotional intelligence and how you can use it in the organization.
We want to start by introducing you to a process that you can use to integrate emotional intelligence development into your organization for your senior leaders. So we'll talk through the 5 steps that you see on the screen. And the first thing that you have to do if you're thinking about a process like this is you have to get buy-in from the participants who will be part of the process. And whether you're talking about getting buy-in from a one-on-one relationship, maybe an executive coaching client, or working with an executive team or a leadership team, you have to help the participants in the process understand what the purpose is and why they might want to get involved. So of course you have to establish rapport, help them feel good about the possibility of working with you, see if there's a good match in terms of personality fit, but they also have to see the value from their perspective. Why would they want to go through a process like this? They have to be bought in and willing to participate and take the actions that are required on the development steps, or else the process just won't work. But part of your buy-in process, you want to make sure you explain the deliverables. When the process is all said and done, what will they walk away with? Will they have some specific tangible items that they've received? Just the completion of going through the process itself. What else will you promise that they receive as part of the steps? You also want to clear up any issues around confidentiality before you begin, making sure that everyone knows that when they go through the process, there will be copies of reports, for example, or the plan itself. When they create their development plan, who's going to see it? Will a copy of the report be shared with their manager, or is that confidential just to the person? So for every situation, you can set it up differently, but the key is to make sure that everyone knows up front who's going to see what and how the information will be shared with other people, if at all. And a process like this will require time in the schedule. This is not something that you can just quickly do in a one-time feedback session and be done with. You will have an ongoing relationship with your participants, so making sure they understand the commitment that's involved and that they've been upfront with you as the provider where they have committed to allocate the time. We know at this level in the organization, leaders are extremely busy. Their time schedules are tight. They very often have a busy travel schedule. But for those leaders who are very committed to a process like this, they will find the time and make it a priority. It's also important to discuss the working relationship. How often do you expect to interact with the person? What do you expect from them? What do they expect from you? So just getting some clarity around your working style and how often you'll interact with them. And moving specifically into the idea of using EI as part of the development plan, helping them to understand the value of why EI makes a difference. So showing examples of the case studies or talking about the return on investment, or showing them the examples of the case study like I introduced around New Zealand Telecom. In organizations that have conducted the research, they often find that EI tends to differentiate high and low performance. If that's true, then training and development around EI is a valuable tool. So how do you help them understand and be supportive of using EI as part of their development? So just talking them through the process of what's going to be involved, the fact that they'll come out of the process with a development plan in place, and then making sure they understand that there's also some follow-up steps that will be required. So establishing clarity around all of the steps, making sure that they're fully committed to begin, and then following through with the next step, which would involve the process of measuring, getting a baseline of where they are in terms of their current EI or where they are in their terms of EI potential, and then taking it forward from there.
There are various ways that you can measure EI. There are a lot of different instruments available. These are some of the more prominent ones that you've probably seen as you've done your research around EI instrumentation. And we're going to focus primarily today on what's called the emotional quotient inventory, the EQI, because we've found that this seems to be an extremely powerful way to measure emotional intelligence. And we've been using it for a long time. We conduct certification classes on it. We have thousands of data sets with it. We set up success profiles with it. So we know it works. There's also a 360 version of this that we use with a lot of our coaching clients. So just keep in mind that there's a tool here, and we will spend, our time in the examples going forward talking about basically the EQI and the 15 subscales that it has. So we'll bring those up as we go along. Well, once you have collected the information and analyzed, interpreted, then it moves you into a position where you can begin to give feedback.
And we assume and recognize that a lot of the attendees in the webcast are probably already certified to conduct feedback on different assessment tools. So this should be a review, but it's a key piece of this process. You have to help people understand where they are in terms of EI before you put the plan together for development. So when you're conducting feedback, you'll follow a basic process that might look similar to what you see on the screen, where you establish your rapport, show the feedback results, validate the facts, and help the person understand their results, see the relevance of how it applies in the real world, and how they'll take the results and explore the benefits of how they might put together their plan, and then transition to that next step of where you put the plan together. So this is a basic process that's probably similar to what you're already using. But specifically with EI feedback, we found that there's a lot of different options for how you can conduct a feedback session. Of course, what we recommend and what we try to do with our clients is conduct feedback in person whenever possible. So if we're working one-on-one with an executive coaching client or with a leadership team, we can try to conduct feedback in person if the schedules allow and the timing and location is convenient. But we have also found a lot of success conducting feedback using video conferencing. So using a web-based program where they can see us in real time, using our webcams, they can see our computer screen so they can see the results on the screen. And it works really well. So if you can't meet in person, the video conferencing is a good backup option. And then if you have to, it is possible to conduct a successful feedback using an online or telephone format where they can see your screen and talk to you on the phone at the same time and see the results. So there's a lot of different options, but of course if we can conduct in person, we certainly do. And it doesn't always have to be just one-on-one feedback. We can do EQI feedback as part of a group training or development process. So you can conduct feedback to a group overall and then still have some one-on-one follow-up meetings to put plans together. So a lot of different options, and of course some best practices or guidelines for how you would conduct the feedback. What you see on the screen should be a review of some of the best practices that you already know. But what we recommend, one of the most important things to consider for the EI feedback in particular is to listen more than you talk. When you're conducting feedback, engaging in that dialogue with the feedback recipient is so important, where they see the results and they have a chance to explore and think about what this really means for them. Have them come up with some examples of where they think they are, ask the questions that come to mind for them. So really engaging in that dialogue helps them to make sense of the feedback that they're receiving and use the information in the best way possible to put the plan together. So of course some of the best practices that you see on the screen. Just a general review, but the main guideline here is to really engage in that dialogue where the participant is using the information and making sense of it and drawing some relevance to their own situation before they put the plan together, which will be the next step. So after they've received feedback, you want to help them start thinking about their next steps. How can they use the information to create that development plan? And in terms of just some big picture guidelines of what we recommend for development, the first thing that we always emphasize with our participants and our clients is to maximize your strengths. So on the development plan, you want to find out the areas where the person already is doing really well. From an EI perspective, there are certain things that they bring to the table that are key strengths that you want to leverage and take advantage of. Figure out what those areas are, help them apply additional skills and knowledge that they can add to that strength area, and it will really develop into a key thing that they can leverage and take advantage of. And it's important to mention here as well, just because it's an area of strength doesn't mean it can't be overused. So you want to be very careful in the development planning to think about ways to tap into those strengths, but also be very mindful that you don't overuse it to the point that it becomes a potential challenge because it's too high. So sometimes people get feedback and they think, oh, I want to be as high as possible and get the highest score I can or use this as much as possible. But every area could be overused to the point where it becomes a challenge. And along those same lines, around potential challenges, it's not always something that's too high. It could be something that's too low. So whether the challenge is coming from overuse or underuse, you want to identify where some potential challenges might exist, help the person grow and stretch as much as possible. But if it's something that's just hardwired, innate component of who they are and how they approach life in different situations from an EI perspective, how do you help that person put containment around the challenge so it doesn't get in the way of their success? So we've put some ideas on the screen that you can take a look at around containment strategies. One of the first things you could try to do is develop and flex as much as possible. You see that on the list. So grow and stretch and use your ability as much as you can. If it's still a challenge area, some other techniques you could use might be to use a partner. So find somebody in the organization or on your team who has your challenge area as their strength. So get some ideas and recommendations from them on how to put some containment in place. So perhaps they sit next to you in the meeting so they can be available to give you the elbow if you need it, or they'll just kick you under the table if you are starting to exhibit a behavior that's not successful or wouldn't be good for the team environment that you're working in. Maybe they just give you a little nudge, and after the meeting they take you out in the hall, give you some feedback right on the spot, so you kind of see from their perspective why that behavior might not have been the best for the situation at hand, and you start to get some examples leveraging off their strength on some techniques that you might put into place. You could also try some other techniques or strategies, maybe change the job around. Find a strength that you have in a different area that you can use to balance your challenge area. So figure out how to leverage and take advantage of the strengths that you bring so you can achieve some balance in terms of your EI dimensions. And then lastly, at the bottom of the list, find some support systems that you can put into place. So maybe there's some tools or resources, job aids that you can use, a lot of different support systems or strategies, using a support network or maybe an electronic reminder in your calendar to help you think about certain things or to keep you in check on different areas. A lot of different techniques around containment strategies that you can put into place. And then when you start to put some more specifics into place around your development plan, Dick is going to talk about some of the ways that you can go about doing that.
As you put the plan together, obviously you're going to spend some time with the individual's boss, with their peers. There may be a direct report meeting. So if you use a 360, or even if you don't, sometimes you still need to set these meetings up and talk about ways that the individual can capitalize on their strengths, like Deborah was talking about, and put some containment around those weaker areas. And we lay all of this out in a development plan. We lay it out across time. How long is it going to take? What are our objectives that we want to meet in 30 days, and 60 days, 90 days, whatever. So we have the timeline laid out, and then we have ways to evaluate the progress. Now, sometimes we'll have people come to us and they'll say, well, I want to retake the EQI. I took it a couple, 3 months ago. I've been through some training, coaching, and development, and now I want to take it again to see how much I've improved. We typically don't recommend that. If you've taken it once, now you kind of know what you're looking for when you go out there, and it's easy for you to begin to influence the answers. So what we set up in the development plan is a set of metrics, behavioral type metrics, that the individual will get feedback on and can see very clearly in the real world whether or not people are responding to them differently, if they are responding to others differently. So are you getting, in the next 3 weeks, do you have someone on your team come up to you and compliment you on the way you demonstrated impulse control, or the empathy that you showed to one of the members in the team during a team meeting? So we identify things that would come unsolicited from your team members or the boss or other people that you work with. So there's a way to set up these types of metrics that tell you if you're really making some progress, and we evaluate these across a long period of time. So I also mentioned, and Deborah has mentioned, that emotional intelligence has components to it, and you need to know which components are actually predicting and influencing your behavior as a leader, for example. I put a few studies up on the screen showing examples of how different researchers within different organizations at different role levels have found different components of EI being what seem to be the greatest predictor of success. And we've mentioned several times that when we work with our clients, we set up through our analysis process which ones of these are the most important for a particular job within a particular company, because then that allows you to help the individual, as you put the development plan together, to be able to focus on working the skill set and developing more ability around these particular components of emotional intelligence that's going to have the highest payoff for them in their particular job. So the plan has been put in place. You're working the plan. You're looking for those behavioral type metrics that let you know that you're making progress. But now it's time to go to the fifth step, and that is to put in a mechanism that ensures success, a mechanism that allows you to sustain the progress that you make and continue to grow and develop as you move forward. So one way is having a corporate champion or partner, someone who is sponsoring the work with this particular senior leader or group of senior leaders. So there's someone up top that's driving the process and providing the support and the encouragement and making sure that the leader has the opportunity to complete the development plan. We've seen in organizations before where we get all the way through and complete the development plan, and then immediately the leader is given an overwhelming number of tasks to do, and the development around the EI all of a sudden takes a back seat, and he or she doesn't make the progress that they should. So we talked about the behavioral metrics. You also need to try to tie the change that you're looking for in the individual around EI to the person's performance appraisal. And if you look at the subcomponents of the EQI, for example, you'll find a lot of those are direct links to competencies and skill sets that a person is supposed to have and is rated on in their performance appraisal. You'll also find that you can tie them to the business strategy and objectives. This helps ensure that you'll continue to get focus on them. When someone changes, you reward the change, and it might be just by recognizing the change. You use multiple infusion points, multiple ways of bringing in the developmental activities to bring in the training. You can have posters, you can have screensavers, you can have training, you can talk about it in the various meetings, you can have excuse me, EI be part of the last thing you discuss in each meeting, or maybe it's the first thing you discuss in each meeting. That way everyone is constantly reminded of the significance of EI or a particular component of it. You recognize it, reinforce it, and reward it in the organization. So you need a mechanism in place that allows you to track and monitor the progress of the individual. And we help our clients set these up so that you can tell if they're making progress. They can tell if they're making progress. If it's a program, the HR enables the program and usually tracks a number of different indicators that lets them know how well the program is working. We try to make sure that they get much more than once a year feedback, and we put key dates on the calendars, and those become important, and they're supported by the champion in the organization. And you have to provide those resources and support to help the individual be successful. And these come down to time, money, training, articles, books, or whatever that they might need to read. You may have coaching and mentoring as part of this program, but it takes commitment on the part of the individual and commitment on the part of the organization to make it successful. So what we want to do now is just give you a couple case studies to show you how this works and give you a little more perspective.
Okay. We wanted to give an example first of the participant on the right. When we talked earlier about the EI being a differentiator between leaders if everything else is equal, we have a case study that will illustrate what that looks like in the real world. And we have another case study of a different leader who's an example of the situation on the left where EI was a challenge area for that person. So let's start with the leader on the right-hand side with the great EI. And as a visual, let me just explain what we're looking at in terms of the graph on the screen. One way that we present the results from the EQI assessment that we talked about is on a spider graph or a radar graph that you see on the screen. We can array the 15 subscales around the outside of the graph, and the scores are plotted in the middle part where the red area represents the scores on each of those 15 subscales. So what we look for and what we advise our participants when we provide feedback is that we'd like to see a fair amount of red area on the graph. We'd like to see a score of at least 100 at a leadership role, but another key thing that we look for is the shape of the graph. We'd like to see a rounded shape because that would indicate a good balance across the subscales. So if all of the scores were exactly the same, the graph would make a perfect circle. So we can use that as an analogy to say that the graph is well balanced or well rounded. So that indicates a good profile for what we'd like to see in terms of EI. So on this particular graph, this is a senior executive at a very large international client that we work with. And we had worked with this executive leader in terms of some ongoing leader feedback and leader development plans. And this woman in the organization has risen up across her career to progressively higher and higher levels, has moved into a very senior position, and has continued to be successful throughout her career in terms of performance and just continued to move up. As we mentioned earlier, EI is not the only thing. You have to have the right combination of experience and IQ and ability and other kinds of things like that. But the EI for her in particular has also helped quite a bit because she's got such a great base to start from. You can see the EI pattern is very well rounded. There's only a few areas that dip a little bit lower than some of the others. So in terms of a development plan, we worked with her to help her identify and maximize those areas of strength and really take advantage of the potential that she brings from this great EI starting point. And then we also helped work with her in terms of a development plan on being very sensitive to those nuances of the areas that dip a little bit lower or some areas that could be overused at times, and really striving for continued focus and attention to strive for that balance and being careful of the types of situations where maybe that lower flexibility becomes a potential challenge, if there's a chance for rigidity around certain issues or decisions, when do those situations tend to occur, how to create that development plan to be careful about that area. So just some of those kinds of things to really help this leader take best advantage of the potential that she brings. So she has that great base of the EI potential along with those other success factors that it takes to be important. And then when we overlaid that development plan on top of all of this other information that you see, it really helped her just enhance and continue to be even more and more successful as she continued to progress through her career in that very large international company. So that's an example of a leader with really good EI that's working successfully and had a lot of success because of the EI pattern. But we have an example on the other side of the coin that we wanted to share as well.
You'll notice right away that this pattern looks considerably different than the one Deborah was talking about. And she mentioned to you that roundness is one of the qualities that we would like to see on the graph. When you look at this particular senior executive's graph, you can see it's not rounded, it's very jagged, and as a result it contributed to a number of behaviors that were impeding the individual's ability to be continue to be successful in the organization. An extremely bright individual cognitively, but some difficulties in terms of interacting with peers and with the boss. And we began working with this individual to help contain some of these areas. But in this case, as Deborah was mentioning to you before, we needed to have had full commitment from the individual to really do what it was going to take to put containment around these areas, because In this particular person's case, it was going to require some significant work to do. And this was something that he played with and put some effort in, but not enough to make enough difference. And he ended up going home. But one of the things that he did, it was a shock to his system, and one of the things that he did was said to us, I would like to continue to use you guys, and let me get serious about this. I realize that when I go to my next job, I need to go in with some containment around some of these areas so I don't get in trouble with it this time. So we spent time working with him to create containment in these areas, and he's been in his new job now for several years and is doing much better in terms of emotional intelligence and the interaction with his colleagues than he was in the old job, and is being very successful. It takes a lot of work. It takes work on his part every day to maintain the containment, but he's doing that, and we expect him to continue to be successful. When the stress level goes up, we can see a tendency to relapse maybe back into some of these areas, but we still maintain contact. We're still doing some remote coaching with him, and he's being successful. So the process will work if you have a good solid process, and we do, and you have the commitment from the individual, a lot of commitment. If it the graph looks like the one you see here, it can be done and they can be successful. So keeping these two case studies in mind and the things that we've been talking about today, you have an opportunity to really create a return on your investment by helping your senior leaders develop and take advantage of their emotional intelligence. And like Deborah was saying to you earlier, it doesn't matter if you have great emotional intelligence to start with or you don't have a lot. Both cases can benefit significantly from a developmental plan on emotional intelligence. So if the individual has a lot, they can learn to use it better and more effectively, and that will in turn help the organization. If they don't have a lot of emotional intelligence, then helping with the containment around it, helping them to use the strengths that they do have, can make a significant difference in their performance within the organization. And then if you begin to multiply that by putting this process in with a lot of your leaders across the organization starts to actually perform better than it was. So you can get a significant return on your investment by putting these programs in and using the process like we were talking about earlier, where we put in behavioral metrics, we put in quantitative metrics, so that you can track the changes in the individual's behavior, their performance, and the impact that that has on your organization's bottom line. So an extremely powerful tool that can be used. And we do a lot of work with organizations in terms of assessing and creating the success profiles, certifying the people to be able to administer the EQI. So, we invite you to ask us questions, email questions to us. You'll have an opportunity to fill out a survey shortly. If you have questions, ask us. We would be happy to talk to you to help you get started on a program like this. And Deborah, do you have anything else that you want to add before we turn it over to Dana?
I think I just wanted to close by saying that I think our attendees will recognize that the concept of emotional intelligence is becoming more and more popular, more commonplace. even 5 or 10 years ago, people might have thought that something like this was too touchy-feely and not really tied to the bottom line, or they didn't see the value of focusing on training like this. But more research is coming out, and organizations and leaders are starting to recognize the value even more of how emotional intelligence can impact success in leadership. And I think the environment is ready for more focused attention on development efforts around EI and how it can impact individual performance and the organization and working with teams. So I think the timing is great. I hope we've provided some ideas and recommendations on some processes and best practices that seem to work well. And we certainly would welcome any ongoing questions or discussion around how people could use this in their workplace or with their clients.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. And Dana, I know there are a few things that you want to add, so we'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Dick. Thanks, Deborah. And that concludes our webcast for today. On behalf of my colleagues at High Performing Systems, we appreciate your attendance. And just a few reminders before we log off. Please take a few minutes to fill out the survey that will open in your browser as we conclude the session. Also, be sure to look for an email from me that will include handouts from today's presentation. And we'd like to invite you to join us at a future presentation. Please check our website frequently for a complete listing of HPS online events. If you have any questions about today's presentation, or if you'd like to speak with one of High Performing Systems talent management experts, please email info@hpsys.com or leave a comment in the post-webcast survey. Since 1984, HPS has provided consulting, assessment, coaching, and training for people and organizations around the world. If you would like more information on how to become certified to administer the EQI 2.0 and the EQ 360, please email Deborah at hpsys.com. In the meantime, thanks again for attending the webcast, and we hope you have a great day.